This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors with Hiking Bob podcast. I am your host, Hiking Bob Falcone. And you can find out everything you want to know about where to find me or how to contact me or my social media or all that kind of good stuff at my website at hikingbob.com. I can give you all kind of social media links and stuff, but it's just too complicated and long. So hikingbob.com, everything is there. You can even find a link where you can send me an email. I get emails from people all the time about questions, or they have suggestions, which we really love to get suggestions for topics or guests you'd like to see on the podcast. And you can even sign up for my free newsletter and get up to date on things. And since my column isn't running at The Independent just yet, my newsletters are becoming a little longer, but mostly, all blogs and, just more related stuff to outdoor recreation. I don't drift off topic like other newsletters in town that are supposed to be about outdoor stuff. So anyway, check me out at hikingbob.com. Today, my guest is Susan Davies, who is the Executive Director of the Trails and Open Space Coalition and a frequent guest and a good friend. Hi, Susan.
Hi, it's good to be back on.
It's nice to have you back on. And I thought we'd bring you in today to talk about a lot of the changes that have happened in town since last time we had you on. So last time we had you on, we had some things going on. The INGIB was going on. You were advocating for that, of course, and you guys did sound like you did okay with that, and people supported you. But since then, we've had a lot of things happen. We've had 4 new members of City Council, so the majority of City Council is new. We've elected a new mayor. Took 2 elections to get that to happen. We've extended the TOPS tax for another 20 years.
With 78% of the voters saying yes. That was huge.
And 20 years from 2025. So we got a couple years to go before it even starts to extend. So a lot of things have happened in this town. And I thought I'd have you on just to discuss some of these things. So let's start off with the political stuff, I guess. TOPS tax, 78% approval rate. It actually hit 80 at one point. Dropped down a few. I'm okay with that. 78% is a pretty big message from the community. What do you think?
I think it's huge. I mean, of course, it always helps when you can start a ballot initiative without raising taxes. Right. But nonetheless, I really do believe people looked at that program, when they look around the city and see all the things that TOPS has done, it's hard not to support it. It really is. It's very hard not to believe that that's one of the best spent pennies we spend in our city. Yeah.
And you and I and a lot of other people were part of the PR campaign leading up to that. And I think that a lot of people, this is a transient town due to a lot of military. I mean, it's not as transient a town as a smaller military town. I mean, we're 500,000 people. Not everybody's moving in and out of here all the time. But, there's a lot of people who move in, move out. So there was an education campaign, I think. And I think it went really well. I think the message was, well, do you go to this place? Well, this is what bought it. Do you go to that place? Well, that bought, this bought that. Have you been to this park? Well, this fund helped build that park. And I think once people got a good grasp on what the tax did and how it benefits them. And the biggest example I always use was Red Rock Canyon Open Space. Probably one of the most popular places in the entire region would not exist if it wasn't for this program.
Totally.
And I think they went well. So I think we got a good message. We lost the last election. I think there was a lot of reasons for that, but the biggest one I think was it was just too complicated of a ballot. I wasn't even sure I could explain it to people, and I knew what it said. You, I think, were faced with the same issue. It was very complicated. We went very simple this time. Hey, listen, we want to change a couple little tweaks. We're not going to raise it, and we want to do it for 20 more years. And everybody's like, sure, okay.
I think that was a big part of it. And I also know that we had people that we connected with that went out into parks, went out into open spaces, talked to people. We had lots of folks that picked up a sign from our property and put it out on their yard. And we were grateful for that. So I think it started a conversation. And when, as you say, when people were faced with the facts, let's see, can I afford $14 per person per year to support a tax that does all this for me? Yeah, I guess I can.
And it's the same $14 a year they've been paying for the last 25 years. So it was a pretty easy thing. So really, I think it's a great message from the community to the governing body that this is something we support because we value our parks. I think we had good support from the mayor at the time, Mayor Suthers, who was very supportive of it, and he's been supportive of parks during his 8 years that he was in office. We'll talk a little bit about his departure here pretty soon, and and his attitude that parks are more of an infrastructure than an amenity, if that makes sense. And I think that helped too. People changed how they viewed how important parks are to our community.
I completely agree. It's not an extra, especially not in this town.
Right.
It's a given. You move to this town, you come as a tourist to this town because of our parks, trails, and open spaces. So it was not a difficult sell, as you say. It was really pretty easy to, once you had the facts out there and explained all the things it's accomplished and what could still be done over 20 more years. Right. And that was exciting to people. When people are just moving to town, you know what? It's getting more crowded. We need more space. Well, this is the way we're going to get more space, by being allowed to preserve more acres of open space.
And at the, falling right on the heels of that, buying 1,000 acres of land on the east side of town, which is, the east side of town is kind of a difficult place to do this because it's flat land, because we're basically where the plains run into the mountains. So you can buy a lot of land on the west side of town because a lot of it's not buildable, but then it's also hard to build trails and parks there. But on the east side of town, you run out of the public lands and the private lands, and a lot of it is either ranch land or it's bought up for housing. So we were able to buy 1,000 acres of land at a pretty good price on the east side of town. Now, boom, now we have a huge open space. It eventually will open. It's going to take a little while. It needs to revegetate, and a lot of things have to happen there, but we got the land. So the biggest hurdle, getting land, actually happened.
But I do like to remind people of a couple things. First of all, I think we learned a lesson from the last campaign. Some of us, when we were looking to increase the TOPS tax, some of us wanted to see improvements in the areas of parks and to see more miles of trails built. And I think the public told us, you know what, don't expect TOPS to do everything. And
Right.
and it never could.
Right.
But I think that was a loud message. So now the message needs to be, okay, we heard you. TOPS cannot fix everything. TOPS has its specific purpose. But that doesn't mean we still don't need funds to build those promise parks and to meet all those backlog of needs where we still have padlocked sports courts in some part of our city. Terrible playgrounds.
My neighborhood park.
Yes. Swimming pools that don't work. Your neighborhood park.
My neighborhood park. It's
right.
sinking.
You're checking the boxes on your neighborhood park.
Right.
But I know of a lot of others too. And that just breaks my heart because they moved to that area in part because of that neighborhood park. And now they can't access it. And we got to fix that.
And, and the good thing about this campaign was that we really explained, because there was a lot of questions about how come this tax isn't taking care of this? Well, it's not designed to, and it's not allowed to. I mean, the language is extremely specific on what it can be used for. But it did highlight that the governing body, which has still not gotten the parks funding to where it was pre-recession, is now 20 years behind and really needs to catch up, which is going to bring us to the second thing we're going to talk about here in a second. But it did highlight that while TOPS is a great thing, it never was intended to, and in my opinion, never should be the primary funding for the Parks Department. And a lot of people were worried about that, which brought some language changes in there to make sure that didn't happen. I understand where that sentiment was coming from. I'm not sure that I was always on board with it, but I was okay to go with it. And my attitude is, let's see how it works. And if it doesn't work, we can ask the voters to tweak it, give it a couple of years and see what happens there. So I'm okay with it. I mean, as being on that committee, our job is to work within the parameters that we're giving. So we will, and with us in the Parks Department and the staff there, will work within the parameters we're given and make sure that we do the best job we can and be good stewards of the public's money. So I'm happy to pass, obviously, and I know that Mayor Suthers was happy it passed. He did not want that to go to not happen on his watch, and he was influential in making that happen. So that brings us to the next thing. We have 4 new council members, and from the outside, it looks like they're pretty much a pro-recreation, pro-parks group, and they go along with the other council people who, for the most part, have been pretty pro-parks. What's your take on that?
Completely agree. I can't remember a slate of 4 candidates that won that are more pro-parks. I mean, you have Dave Lineweber, who started PPRA, Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance.
The fishing guide.
And as a fishing guide, right? You have Brian Risley, who used to chair the CTAB committee. That's a Citizens Transportation Advisory Board. Rides his bike everywhere. He cares about infrastructure. He cares about non-motorized transportation and parks and trails. Then you have Lynette Iverson Crow, who was one of the chairs of the TOPS Extension Committee. That's how important it was for her to see that won. She actually helped lead that campaign. So Lynette is all over it. She's always been a supporter. And then we have our brand new district council member, Michelle Tellerico, who has attended a couple of Parks Advisory Board meetings, which is great because she is the liaison. And she, before she won, contacted me a couple of times, Bob, and said, I want to learn more. I want to know more about what parks do and how they need to be helped in this next session. So I was excited by her questions and by her concern about how do we improve this.
And the existing council members, you've got Randy Helms, you've got Dave Donaldson, you've got Yolanda Avila, Nancy Henjum, Mike O'Malley. They've all been pretty pro parks too. So it's been a pretty good, for the most part, pretty good bunch of people. And at the very least, if they had questions or they had concerns about something, I never thought that they were. I always thought that any concerns or questions they had were well-founded. They just needed to be maybe a little bit more persuaded. But I've never sensed that from anybody an overt
Not anti, and quite frankly, I think you're right. I think there was some apathy before. I mean, I've been covering this beat for some time, and I would say in years past, it was like, well, this just isn't all that important. I do believe that our past mayor set the bar high and said, no, this is important. Right. He constantly was referring to the importance of a city that reflected its beautiful scenery. And I absolutely believe our next mayor, this mayor, will do the same. Yeah.
And, the previous mayor, Mayor Southers, was 180 degrees from the mayor before him, who
wanted to sell parks.
Who, yes, was not a good thing. So we've got a slate of council people who, for the most part, are very. I think to be honest with you, I mean, the last couple of things that have come in front of them that were related to parks were unanimous votes in favor. I think that we can. I expect hard questions from my council people when they're presented with something, especially if it involves spending money or anything. I expect hard questions. That's a good thing when that happens. But, it's good to see that they're just not coming out there saying, I don't care what it is, I'm voting against it. I have hard questions. If you answer them, then I'm in favor. I'm okay with that. I want somebody who's paying, because that tells me they're paying attention when they ask those kind of questions.
I loved it when a recent meeting, maybe it was before the TOPS ballot initiative went to the voters, but Nancy Henjum, council member Nancy Henjum, actually said to our then park director, Britt Haley, still is, but I think she was maybe acting at the time, doesn't matter. Bottom line was, she said, I want you to come back to this council with ideas on how we start to chip away at the long-term problems facing parks. I mean, we haven't heard that. We haven't heard a council member saying, we want those solutions, come back to us, let us help you find answers.
Yeah, you go back 5 or 6 years and the answer was, oh, it just whatever, we're not going to deal with it. So it's a good sign that we've got some good council people on here. I think generally overall, this is a good slate of council people. I think they're going to serve the city well. We'll see, time will tell, but we have some of them who've been here for a while, so we've already got a track record there. So let's talk about the new mayor. Mayor Yemi is if you're going to address him as mayor anything, he wants Mayor Yemi.
And I'm grateful.
That's good, too, because I always mess up his last name.
I do, too.
Mr. Mayor, if you're listening, I apologize, but it'll be Mayor Yemi from now on. Kind of an unknown. I mean, not an unknown completely, but politically, this is his first time running for political office, but he's not unknown around town. He's been involved with Visit COS, if I remember correctly, and other
Chamber.
With the Chamber. So he's been involved with the Chamber of Commerce.
With the city.
With the city. So he's not like he's just dropping in here with no experience and no exposure to what's going on. Also seems to be a pretty pro-parks kind of a guy. He
also came to me over the past 18 months and said, Susan, can we sit down? I want to talk to you about this. And it wasn't just him telling me what he wanted to see with parks. It was truly asking good questions, listening carefully, taking notes. Right. And it was a 15, 20-minute conversation both times that we had the conversation. First, if it was a more general conversation, the second time was more about tops. But I felt so good about, again, the caliber of his questions and his response. And he said, look, this is why I live here. My kids love the parks. We're in the parks all the time. Why wouldn't you take care of them? Of course we're going to take care of them. And I love the fact that he has said he would like to see general fund support return to pre-recession levels. I would like to see it return to pre-recession levels plus a little inflation factor built into that.
Which is by now quite a bit. It's been a long time.
It would be. So, yes, it would be nice to get back to that $19 million, and there have to be a few adjustments with that. But maybe back to like 25 million would be wonderful and more appropriate. So we'll see where that goes. But I think he's saying the right things, asking the right questions. I remain very hopeful.
Yeah, well, time will tell. We'll see how things go, but I'm pretty excited about it too. One of the things, I should say that I also reached out to his office about having him on the podcast, and I think that that's going to happen, but I'm not exactly sure when. He had 100 media requests waiting for him on the day he took office.
Oh my gosh, he was on a national public radio.
Yeah.
He was in the New York Times. I mean, it was pretty impressive.
So getting down to little old me might take him a while, but he does know I'm out there, does want to have a talk with me, so hopefully that'll happen this summer.
Great.
I'm hoping for the summer. We'll see what happens. But I'm definitely on his radar and he's on mine, so we'll just see what happens there. So we've talked about is the Parks Department budget, and there's a big backlog of things. And at the recent TOPS meeting, the most recent TOPS meeting we had, we approved the TOPS capital improvement budget for 2024. It went from the TOPS working committee to the Park Advisory Board, which approved it. Now it's got to go to City Council, and it's working its way for the 2024 budget. So by the end of the year, it'll be in there. I don't see any reason why it should change. It's going to go pretty much the way it is. But one of the things we had asked as a committee that we get a better idea of where TOPS budget falls into the overall park system budget, which I thought was a good ask, because we're dealing in a little silo of money, but we're not dealing in the big picture. So we got an idea that one of the things that was mentioned was we had the Jacob study, the infamous Jacob study, which is hundreds of millions of dollars worth of stuff that's backlogged.
261, right? Or
yeah,
something
it's
like
just
that.
But I like that the one comment that was made by Britt Haley was that not all these things are dire things that need to be taken care of right away. There was once you prioritize that, it gets a little better. But there's still a lot of things there. So I'm glad to see that there is some emphasis that we really just can't have padlocked playgrounds or sports field. Like at my neighborhood park, there's 3 basketball or tennis courts. One of them is padlocked because it's just in such bad shape. The other 2 are close to being there. We have one of the few swimming pools in the city of my park, but it's built over a mine shaft. My whole neighborhood's built over mine shafts, and it's sinking, so it's been closed for 3 years. And in my discussions, it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to fix it. So they're actually thinking about scrapping it, putting in water features and play ponds like they do like at Venezia Park, which I think is a far better idea. Maintenance costs are far less. The upkeep is less. It's a little bit more to put it in, but you get that money back long term. So there are some ideas in there, but there's just not the funding for it. And you can't just go and raise taxes. There's got to be some inventive ways to do that. And I think we're going to start seeing some of that come up. So we improved the capital improvement budget for 2024, and it's moving its way through. What did you think of that budget? I know you had a little concerns about it, but there's a lot of good things on there. And we'll talk a little bit why it was limited in some ways. But what did you think of that budget?
Well, my frustration with the budget, and yes, they really did try to do a good job of spreading around the funding to different parts of the city. That's very important. But my frustration would be, okay, we're going to put $100,000 into this project, or we're going to put $200,000 on this project, knowing full well to do a little piece of that project was going to cost $1 million. So I don't like it when we give the perception that we're going to get a lot of work done, and we're really not. So that bothers me. So we have something in the city budget called CTF, or Conservation Trust Fund. It's lottery money, and it is sent out to cities and counties based on population. When it was created many years ago, it was supposed to address capital needs. So you were supposed to use that money to do a cool project. Now it goes into salaries. And we understand why. Because salaries that used to be paid for by general fund have been pushed into Conservation Trust Fund.
Back during the recession when those jobs would have been lost entirely.
And they need to go back to the general fund. And that was an exciting thing that came out of the Parks Advisory Board. They wanted to have some language with the budget saying, we would ask that council and the administration consider putting more parks staff salaries back into general fund as they used to be so that we can get more capital funding and get more capital projects done.
And some of that comes right out of TOPS money, too. And a significant portion of TOPS money is paying for salaries, and some of it is designed to. There's administration costs, and some of it is designed to.
Rangers?
But a lot of that should not be. And a lot of it, when we looked at that budget, and it was kind of mind-numbing, but it was like, well, this person's pay is 20% from this fund and 10% from this fund and 50%, and it's confusing. But there's reasons why that happened, it affects where they can work too.
Right.
If you're paid for from this budget, you have to work on whatever that budget also covers. There has been a movement, a lot of discussion in our committee to get a lot of those things, not only from CTF but from the TOPS fund, offloaded back in the general fund.
Yes.
But you can't do it overnight. There's a lot of money in there. But there is some discussion with trying to get some of that stuff offloaded and, and get that back to general fund support where it was before the recession, where it should be. But we're running that discussion right into a economic downturn where tax revenue is
flat. It's not
flat.
down, but
it's not down, but it's not what it was the last couple of years. So we're running these two things into each other, so it's probably not going to happen for a couple of years. But you get the discussion going, and you get those things penciled in your budget to move a couple of salaries over. We're not talking about eliminating any positions. Obviously, nobody wants that, but to just get some of these positions paid for from the proper pot of money.
And I think it's going to be really important with these new members of council and our new mayor to say, okay, in your district, you have so many irrigation systems that are failing. You have so many playgrounds that are padlocked. What would it take to unpadlock them? Well, this much money. Right. So if we were able to move this position to general fund and use that money to fix this irrigation system, I think they have a return like in 2 years, you get a payback because you're no longer wasting money. If you switch out the Kentucky bluegrass for the native grass, plant that, you don't mow it as often, you don't water as often. Those are wonderful, wonderful investments, but you need money to do it.
Right, exactly. So it's interesting seeing how that's working. The other part of the issue with why, you talked about 100,000 here, 200,000 here. A lot of that's for master planning. And of course, that has to happen. Some of it's for master planning, but a lot of it has to happen before you can actually do anything. A lot of it is preliminary work that needs to be done. It'd be nice to see, we're going to put $2 million into this project and make it happen. But that's difficult to do. But the other problem is that it's a manpower situation. We're facing a kind of a weird capacity issue where even when we have the money, there's a lot of unspent, unbudgeted money in the TOPS fund. There's not enough bodies to actually do the work.
And that's what we're hearing.
Right.
I do think in some cases there could be some contracting and bringing in some trail companies that could come in and do some of this. They're still going to need oversight. I get that. But I do think there could be some workarounds. I mean, we love our staff. Yeah. We love our park staff. They do the job of 3, 4, 5.
They work very hard.
They work very, very hard. So if they tell us this is our capacity, we have to accept that. Yeah. I just am itchy to get some of this work done. I want to see those trailheads put in. I want to see, we have all these people coming to this Blodgett,
master plan.
Yes, this process. And we've got the process is underway. The public is getting an opportunity, to do some participation. But we also have a group of folks that are getting together, and I'm hearing from some of these different people, what is it they want? What do they want to see? And I think you're not going to see that.
Right.
You're not going to see it for years. So I get nervous when we try to get all this enthusiasm, whether it's a community park on the east side or it's something like that, because it takes time, especially in the current, the way things are. Yeah,
we talked about that on a podcast a couple of weeks ago where we discussed it. I called it, you can't always get what you want. And a lot of what the Parks Department has to do is not only manage expectations so they're reasonable, but temper some expectations that, this master plan project's going now. It could be 2, 3, 5, 10 years before you see some of this stuff happen because A, it takes money. B, it just takes time. Things just don't appear overnight. And C, there's just the capacity. Is there the staff and manpower to not only manage it, but to actually do the work? And Colorado Springs Parks Department has seen a drain of very good talent over the last year.
Few years, actually.
Yeah. I mean,
people retaring or people moving on to other
jobs? People retiring, or they've gotten jobs that were a step up in their career, which you can't blame anybody for that. We're going to put up a no hunting sign around the Parks Department so these other agencies stop poaching our people. But which I mean, of course, that speaks well of the Parks Department too. We're turning out such great people that they're being sought after by other agencies, and we're losing them to other agencies. Can't blame anybody for that. If you're the person that they're looking for and they're offering you a great opportunity, you'd be crazy not to take it. So there's this brain drain, like I like to call it, and getting people to fill those positions. We're not just talking about manual labor, which is hard enough to fill as it is. We're talking about credentialed, well-educated, well-experienced people at mid-level management that are leaving, that they are hard to replace. And sometimes it takes months. And sometimes you get a candidate and then that candidate says, I got a better job somewhere else. And boom, you start all over again. It's very difficult to. Forest Service is having the same issue. They had a bunch of jobs for this summer that went just completely unfilled. Nobody wanted them. And Forest Service jobs, even temp jobs, are not bad paying jobs to get. And they just poof. And for them, trying to start that thing over again is another year. So they're stuck for a year with not enough manpower and a long list of things that need to be done. So if you're out there and you're listening and you're wondering why this trail is not being done or this is taking so long, it's a lot of factors going in there. And everybody likes to say money, money, money. And it has a piece of the puzzle, obviously. Nothing's done for free. But it is a whole lot more than that.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. I mean, look at the Palmer Loop Trail. How long that took to get done, and some of that was just manpower. Some of it takes time to do the assessment, and and then eventually they had to get signs from Washington, D.C. That took a while to then get the design okayed. And I mean, yes, so it's your bureaucracy, but it can also be just a lack of people to get stuff done, which I would argue means our friends groups are that much more important.
Absolutely.
They're so important. And we're so lucky. We have a couple dozen friends groups in this region, and they do amazing work. And some of them are just rock stars. But I have to tell you, Bob, some of them are really hurting. Yeah. They are aging out. They need young folk who love and use these trails, parks, and open spaces to step up, start with a volunteer project. Just come out one day in the summertime. Just do one day. I bet you might like it, especially some of the crew leaders we have out here are just wonderful. And then come for 2 days and come for 3. But eventually getting people to participate in the process of taking care of these properties, that would be huge.
And it's not only a matter of being out and doing stuff. A lot of these friends groups need board members who have specific skills. If you're a good accountant, they need a treasurer. If you're good at networking or you have experience with fundraising, they need a grant writer.
Social media. If
you're just good at taking notes, they need a secretary. So if you're not up for doing and not all friends groups do manual. Are out in the outdoors.
Exactly. Some are leading hikes.
Our friends at Friends of Garden of the Gods, for example, are mostly a fundraising friends group.
Interpretation.
But they're not out there swinging the pickaxes and doing stuff like that. Well, you have other friends groups like the Guardians of Palmer Park. They're all about swinging the axes and doing the manual labor. So there's different friends groups, and even with a friends group that does a lot of manual work, if that's still not your thing, they still need administrative type people. If you're good at leading an agency, they might need a chair or vice chair, or president or vice president, whatever they want to call it. They might need somebody on the board of directors. There are a lot of needs out there, and not every friends group is out there to push a wheelbarrow or anything like that. If you like doing that stuff, there's plenty of that to be done, and there are groups do that. Our friends at the Incline Friends, they're very much into the actual physical work.
Some are and some aren't.
Some are and some aren't.
Exactly right.
Some aren't. And those are out there greeting people and talking to them as they're getting ready to go up the incline, or they're raising money, or they're doing outreach. There's a lot of different things out there. So there's a fringe group out there that will match you up pretty well if you are interested in being involved and you want to. And the other thing is the friends groups have a bit of influence in some policy making, because they're out there to advocate for their park with the Parks Department or whatever governing agency manages that place. So there's a way for you to help, make your park's voice heard. If your park needs something, the friends group is there to help advocate for your park.
We have excellent examples of that. When you think of how effective Guardians of Palmer Park were to get a fence put in, a gate put in to protect their property. Yes, they helped raise some of the money. They got that done. Look at Friends of Guard of the Gods. I mean, they have accomplished so much in their park because they were willing to meet staff halfway, the foundation, Friends of North Cheyenne Canyon, your old stomping grounds. Look at the wonderful things that they accomplished because they came with ideas, great attitudes, sometimes some money, and that's how things get done. I think people get scared about the time commitment, but really, a board meeting is generally about an hour, hour and a half.
Once
a month, or sometimes every other month. It depends on the friends group. And then the actual volunteer projects, some of them go all day, but most Most of them are half a day or a few hours. So it really can be what you want it to be, but jump in there and get involved.
Yeah. If it's your neighborhood park that needs some help, or one of the big regional parks that you just love, they're always looking for some support. You mentioned Friends of Cheyenne Canyon, where when I was chair there, and before and after I was president there, it was a combination of things. We raised a bunch of money. We built the visitor center at Helen Hunt Falls, was fundraising through that group. And when we built the trail to Mount Muskoka while I was there, we did both. We raised a bunch of money to make that happen and worked in partnership with the city, but we also did a lot of manual labor and arranged for manual labor to go up there. So it was kind of a combination of things. So and I kind of liked that. It was kind of a lot of fun. We let the city handle the contract, and we just basically gave them a bunch of money to make this happen. But we were able to raise the money and make that trail happen, or make that, the visitor center happen. We didn't build the visitor center. We didn't do the contracting above our level, but the city was happy to do it as long as we paid for it. So this is where friends groups really help. And if you are interested in being a part of this community and you love your parks and trails and you want to do a little bit more, there's your way to do it. And if you don't want to be on a board or be an officer of a board, be a member at least and help and be supportive. And go out every once in a while.
Yeah,
and
go volunteer.
Go out every
and
once in a while with
legacy.
a rake. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
your legacy.
Yeah.
I mean, when I walk some of the trails now, and I remember that we as an organization were integral in helping to get that connected or extended or something. Oh, I have such pride.
Yeah.
I didn't do it, but I stand on the shoulders of a lot of people that did do some of those things. And how wonderful to be that connected to your community.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of things out there, and the friends groups do need your help. Do you guys have a link on your website where people can find the friends groups?
We do. And also, I would just say, give us a call.
Okay.
You'll find info@trailsandopenspaces.org. We will connect you to a friends group that works well with your interests, where you like to recreate, what you want to do. We'll find you one.
Excellent. Let's talk a little bit about TOSC. How are things going with TOSC? What's any news you have coming out of the Trails and Open Space Coalition?
Well, a couple things, Bob. First of all, our Starlight Spectacular is August 5th, so we would love people to check it out.
Going to do the same rules last year, stay within the park?
We're going to stay in the park for the runners and walkers. The bikers are going to go outside just a little bit through a couple neighborhoods, but we're not going to go on busy streets.
Okay.
So we're going to keep our liability costs appropriate. And
I really liked last year that new route through the park. I didn't think I was going to like it because I'm so used to the big old one that went through downtown.
Wasn't it great?
It was fun.
And it was beautiful. And the biggest concern we had was that there was a bear toward the finish line, but he stayed in the tree. And then we had lots of deer, and I'm thinking, I don't want a deer to run out in front of a bike. But it didn't happen, so everybody was just fine.
And bears
they really enjoyed it.
Bears take small bites.
Take small bites. But it was great fun. It's so family friendly, and it's not a race. And so we're looking forward to folks coming out. It's on our website. Check it out. And
what date is that again?
That's the 5th of August.
5th of August.
And so, check it out. I had told my board of directors and my staff that I was considering retiring at the end of this year. And I went back to them a few weeks ago and I asked for another year.
Good.
So I'm going to be staying on as the head of TOSC through 2024, and I'm excited about that, and we'll see what happens after that.
All right. Well, I give my stamp of approval to that.
Thank you.
Not that you're worried about my stamp of approval.
I'll take it.
You've done so much here in this community, both when you were at the news, working on TV news, and then filling in this position, that it's good to see you're going to stick around for a little longer.
Why would I leave? There's such good stuff happening. There's new leadership, new energy, and TOPS extended. It's like, I want to get.
It's an exciting time.
It's an exciting time. And that's why you're still doing what you do.
And it is. And I'm going to be term limited out myself in about a year and a couple of months. So I have about 14 months, and then I'm going to get term limited out, and I have to leave.
And then we'll have to find something else for you to do.
Oh, jeez. I keep saying I don't want to do anything, but
you always do.
You know me better than that, and everybody
do.
listening to this knows me better than that. But I don't know what I'm going to do. I think my term runs out September of 24, and then I have to leave because I'd served 2 terms, and you can only do that. So, for the people listening, even though it's not an elected a position, I'm a volunteer. It's still a government agency, and we're appointed by council. So, because we're appointed by council, we have term limits, just like city council people do. So I am term limited out.
And I love that, because it should not be a sentence. It should be something you do for a period of time and then step away and let some new folks try it.
And it's interesting because before that I was on different boards and different committees, and I was asked, well, you only need to take a year off and you can come back. So why don't you come back? And I said, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that, because you get a new slate of people in, and then, well, here's the guy who used to run it. He's coming back to put his 2 cents in. It's better for there to be, maybe 5 years down the road you go back if you want. But I always thought that turning around and coming right back in would just I would be uncomfortable if I was a leader in that position, and here comes the old guy back in here, and what's he want? Does he want to do things like we used to? It's better for things to be fresh. So I've resisted that temptation to go back to places where I was before, only because I wouldn't like it if it happened to me.
Well, I think there's probably a few friends groups that would absolutely love to have you back if you ever wanted to come back. But I do agree with you. I also think, though, there's opportunities in mentoring. Like I could see someone being the next chair of the TOPS working committee and reaching out to you, say, Bob, how did you handle this? Or what do you think about this? And that would be lovely.
Yeah, and I think that's always appropriate. It wouldn't be appropriate for me like a year later to be back up there on the thing. It's there's a reason why we have these term limits, so you don't have the same people up there all the time. But that's been my philosophy. If I was that person and I took the reins, and then here comes a year later, I come back in, it's like, what's this guy here? It would just be weird, and I would feel weird, and I would feel weird on both ends of that, being the person up there or coming back in, because my intent would be, being a type A personality. Well, this is how he did it. Nobody wants to know how you used to do things unless they ask you.
That's a good point. Well, I know that when I stepped away from, when Dan Cleveland stepped away from the Trails and Open Space Coalition, I said, Dan, would you please join my board? He said, absolutely not. Right. Absolutely not. And at the time I thought, well, gee, I'd really like you on my board. He said, no, you wouldn't, because I had a way of doing things for the 15 years prior to you, and you don't need that. So
as a firefighter all my life, and we would have people coming from different agencies, and I was one of those. The one thing you never wanted to hear was, well, way back when I was in the other place where I used to work, we did it this way, this way, this way. It's like nobody wants to hear that unless it's an appropriate time to hear that. So again, that's the problem with going back. So which is why I've resisted going back to these agencies. And you know what? I may not. I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but the next guy could be a whole lot better. Next guy or gal. Next guy or gal, and I'm using guy very generically.
I know.
Next guy or gal could be a whole lot better than me.
Well, they'll do it differently.
So why would I want to stick my nose in there and muck things up? And yeah, they're going to do things differently. And different doesn't mean wrong or better, but different is good. It shakes things up a little bit.
So I would love to have been a mouse in the corner when Mayor Yemi had conversations with Mayor Suthers. The to-be Mayor Yemi, mayor in training, had several conversations with the mayor and just, asked him questions and shared his opinions. And it would have been fascinating to hear what was said.
I would have loved. I've been taking notes furiously.
And I would love, John Suthers is quite a writer. Yeah. He's written several books.
There's a new one coming out.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. But wouldn't it be fun if he went ahead and wrote some of his thoughts on running the city of Colorado Springs and so forth? I'd love to know, now that it's all over, what did you think of that? Or how did that affect you? Because when you look back at his legacy, his time in that office, I mean, he had to get through the EPA lawsuit. He had to get stormwater passed very quickly.
Could have bankrupted the city.
It could have been terrible. Yeah. It could have been just terrible. He went through a lot of, and then he went through COVID. I mean, and to this day, you have people that will say the way that our health department behaved, the way that our county commissioners were able to work with our city administration and work with the health department was exemplary. Yeah. We really did that very, very well.
Very even-handed approach.
And he had a lot to do with that. So it would be interesting to see his perspective, but I can't wait to see what the next 4 years are going to be like.
My question for him would be, what were the ideas you had that didn't go through?
And what are you proudest of? What do you think he'd say about it he's proudest of?
Oh, boy.
I think City of Champions, you would definitely point to that, and the Summit House, getting that done. Definitely getting the roads tax passed twice.
I think general infrastructure improvements, stormwater and roads would be two things. If I were him, those are the things I'd be.
I think that's what he would probably say.
And you know what? When his book comes out, I'll invite him on here. We'll talk about it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about it. So anyway, we've covered a lot of stuff here. Just giving kind of a feel for you're more in touch with what the feel is of the city. I have my own little silo. I almost said saloon, which maybe is where I should go when we're done. My own little silo of things, but you have a broader outreach on this. So today, my idea was just to get a feel for, what you think things are going on around here. Let's talk a little bit about the county Parks Department. They have a new chair of their Parks Advisory Board, and he has really done a great job of going to the city TOPS meetings and parks meetings to kind of get a better feel of what's going on out there, which I think is a really good idea. What do you think is going on with the city parks department? The county parks department. They're looking at the Fox Run Nature Center. That process seems like it's moving along. It's just a fundraising, for the most part, a fundraising effort now.
Big one.
What do you think is going on there?
So I would say that Todd's top priorities right now would be definitely, the Fox Run Nature Center, which if you haven't seen the designs yet, you've got to check them out. Everybody out there listening, they're just fantastic. It's really, really exciting. It's going to be certainly a multi-million-dollar project, but very exciting. He wants to get Rainbow Falls reopened.
Yeah.
He's very frustrated with that, and it's just making sure that people that park there can do it safely, or that they find a way to get people in there without using that parking lot. So that's very challenging.
Well, and it's not just even an issue at the parking lot, although that's the way some news stories did it. It's actually an issue that the bridge there is a state highway. There's issues with falling rocks from the abutments,
right, exactly.
And since it's a state highway, the county can't just go in there and do work on it.
But they don't have the money to do it anyway.
And even if they did, they didn't have. But the CDOT is kind of limited.
Right.
So, and trust me, when it comes to what their budget is, a tiny, tiny little park underneath one of their bridges is not high on their priority list as much as we would like it to be. I get it from their point of view. So it's a thorny issue. It's been made to look like, well, just because you can't park there, we can't go there. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. And the county did spend a boatload of money, primarily when I was on the Parks Board there, to get that open. It's not like they don't have a commitment there. But
no, they do, and now the graffiti's coming back,
right,
Bob. It's
because
terrible.
there's nobody there to...
Right, they don't have the eyes on it.
Right.
So I'm worried for that, and I'm sad for what they're going through there. They continue to have... Paint Mines is better, more eyes on it, but that still seems something that they have to keep an eye on, and they're going to be doing a planning process for that. And they're still very, very under-resourced. Yeah. So they do the best with what they have, but that's what I'm hoping that in the next couple of years we start talking about a TOPS tax for the county, very teeny tiny, but a way to start infusing some cash into that. Here's what I'm hearing from my members. I'm hearing them talking about e-bikes. They want some clarification. It's been a few years now.
Still don't have any.
We still don't have any. Come on, where can they be? Where should they be? Etc. And then I'm also hearing about people not feeling safe on our trails.
Right.
About the fact that, some areas, some segments of trail that we all fought so hard to get built now are not in a place where people want to walk through them, run through them, bike through them. And it's because of the unhoused.
Right.
It's because of some of the crime down there. And let's be honest about this. Most of the crime the vast majority of the crime does not involve people who are just going through.
Right.
Nevertheless, we are even hear from the HOT team that those areas are becoming more violent. It's a little scarier than it was even 6 months ago, and that it's a real problem. And
to that regard, City Council approved 4 new rangers, urban park rangers. So they're not going to be out they're not going to be in Red Rock Canyon open space, but they're going to be on the trails that go through downtown, and where the trouble spots are. They will have. And this was going back and forth what their enforcement capability was going to be. But it sounded like after the last meeting, at the last TOPS meeting, they're going to have some kind of actual enforcement capability, which is a step in the right direction. I know they were leaning away from that, which is like, why bother? But they're going to lean back into that. So they'll have some enforcement capability. I think that's a positive thing. There are measures being taken, but it's a slow process, and it should not be taken. In my opinion, we're taking way too long to address this. I think there is some circling of the wagons at the police department because they see anybody out there enforcing the law that's not them as a little bit of a threat. I get that from being a public servant myself. I've seen that happen before. Nothing more. There's 2 things that are territorial as all get out: a fire chief and a police chief, and I've seen both of them. I'm hoping that we kind of change that thing, that you can have enforcement without having to be a full-fledged police officer. Is a full-fledged police officer better, but the salaries are much higher? And state parks here have figured out how to do it with their different levels of rangers. We can figure out how to do it too. But it's a positive step. They approved those out of the general fund, didn't take money out of any other funds to put 4 more people out there. Hopefully this grows. We get more people out there. But yes, it is a concern.
It's huge.
I have a concern too. People who listen to my podcast know a couple episodes back I had some concerns. But it is, and it may make it clear too that 99.99% of the people are not going to have an issue on the park, an issue of a violent nature of the park. Property crimes are an issue. Vehicle burglaries are an issue. They seem to come in spurts. And for the most part, And I'm not victim blaming here, but for the most part, there are people who are not taking steps to protect their belongings. They are leaving cars unlocked. They're leaving belongings out in the open. Burglars are two things. They are cowardly, and they're generally not very smart. But if they walk by your window and there's something right there and they can smash your window and grab it and be gone in a couple of seconds, they'll do it. But they're not going to smash your window and spend time rummaging through there and risk getting caught. Not victim blaming, but let's take a couple of seconds to be responsible for ourselves here is the message I have for that.
I agree.
Just, it's amazing how many times, well, I had my thing on the front seat. Well, okay.
Right.
This is why things happen.
And the other thing people do is they get to it and they try to do the right thing. They pop open their trunk and they put the purse in the trunk, but the person sitting in the parking lot that's been watching to break into it saw you do that.
Right.
And the moment you hit that trail,
Right.
they've smashed it, popped open your trunk.
Right.
And
You
you have to be thinking ahead.
Think ahead. If you're heading that way and you forgot that you didn't do that, stop at a gas station 6 blocks away, do it there where nobody's watching. Then go over there and just get out of your car and you go and take off. You didn't put anything away. Nobody's going to see nothing. You're going to be, I can't say you're going to be fine because I can't guarantee anything. Your chances of not having an unfortunate incident are better than if you don't do all that stuff.
So this is what I'm going to do when I'm retiring. I'm just going to park in trailheads and watch for these jerks that do that, take down their license plates, have a clear sign to the police department, say, okay, this is the license plate. He's heading this direction. Nab him. Because, it is usually a small group of people that do it over and over again. Right. If we can just get them in jail, we can solve our problem. So that's what I'm going to do when I retire.
Sheriff Susan.
I love it.
All right. Well, Susan, anything else you want to talk about today? I think we've had a really good discussion and just kind of caught up on some things.
Yeah, no, it's been great. I love what you do. We'll start a fan club to get you back in the Indy as soon as possible.
I'm thinking about starting a letter writing campaign.
There you go.
I don't want to make anybody mad.
No, let's do it. Let's do it.
It's all finances. I've been told it's just all about finances.
I know. But we miss you. We miss your articles.
I miss being there. There's so much I want to write about. I just don't have the outlet for it.
Well, we can give you space in the weekly blast at Trails and Open Space Coalition.
You guys do.
We'll talk.
You guys do a nice job of mentioning to me whenever I got something going on, so I do appreciate that. Well, Susan, thank you so much for being back on the show.
My pleasure.
Always good to have you on here and have a chat with you. And with that, I think we'll say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast.
Before you go, did you know you can rate and review our Studio 809 podcasts? That will help us because our egos really need to have thousands and thousands of listeners. But that helps our wonderful sponsors reach more ears too. And we do love our sponsors. So just go to Studio 809 or any individual 809 podcast in your iTunes or podcast app and click on ratings and reviews. Thanks.